"No, look at her. It's like she's never worn a dress before today," said Peggy, the senior accountant, and her coworkers, who were in a gossiping flock around her, nodded in agreement. The employees of the Phoenix travel agency, who had the honor and good fortune to work in its representative office abroad, namely in Jamaica, today gathered for a corporate party. It was a small but bright event, because usually the head of the local branch, Kate, was extremely strict to her subordinates and all sorts of fun did not approve. But lately things had changed, so much so that it was noticed and gossiped about. The unapproachable icebox Kate has fallen in love. Under the corporate party rented a small restaurant on the coast, famous for local cuisine, the pearl of which was, of course, a variety of seafood. And the object of Kate's passion was here today. And he was not alone, which, by the way, not only added piquancy to the whole situation, but also hinted at a scandalous development of events. The thing was that the boss managed to fall in love with a married subordinate. True, he was married strangely, and his wife for a long, long time no one in the eyes of no one saw. And here he brought her with him to the holiday, for company, so. And the gossiping tongues were gossiping to make Kate realize that nothing was in store for her. Yes, it was the kind of love that they say is unrequited at first, and then poisonous, destructive to all parties. "Are you resting?" The Snow Queen herself suddenly appeared near the accountants, the advertising specialist, and some other employees. Clad in a black dress footler, complemented by a strict single string of pearls and a stylish and, naturally, expensive watch on her hand, she looked especially tough and gloomy today. Yes, that's right. Her eyes seemed ready to throw lightning bolts, and her lips, which she had barely touched with nude lipstick, seemed unhealthily pale. "Everything is wonderful." Peggy smiled, that 1,000 times used smile that you're supposed to bestow on your superiors. "You look great." She complimented her superior. "And there she is," she added in a snide whisper. "We really don't understand why he brought her." It was about the same wife of Nicky, which today, for the first time, as they call it, brought out in public. She looked about 30, dark skin, brown eyes, black hair. As soon as she entered the hall, many people looked at each other, understandingly so. The rumors were true. About a year ago, Nicky had an affair with a local woman, and now, to such an extent that even married. And it would be better if she was some sultry hottie from those bikini commercials. But no, this one was the most ordinary and not at all bland. Her heels were wobbly, her hair was twisted and disheveled, her movements were angular, and her dress was too tight on her stomach and hips. Manicure, makeup? No, all natural, but that's obviously not a corporate thing. When Nicky introduced her to someone here, she shook her hand firmly, like a man. She also laughed inappropriately, and had so many appetizers on her plate that Peggy squinted suspiciously. Either she didn't care about her weight, or she was pregnant, or maybe both. But Peggy was keeping that gossip out of the world for now, saving it for later. Kate grimly sipped her cocktail, a non-alcoholic one by the way, and glared at the couple. Damn it, why had he brought her here? She'd intended to finally have a frank talk with Nicky today about how this couldn't go on much longer. This strange, misguided one-way love story had begun when Kate had just been transferred to this branch of the travel agency about 6 months ago. It wasn't just a leap, it was a whole jet-setting takeoff in her career. And she, despite her 2 university degrees and 8 years of experience, was terribly nervous because she was afraid of failing. Nicky came to the rescue, even though he wasn't asked. He, as it turned out, perfectly able to cope with both his duties to organize VIP holidays for VIP clients and to help Kate settle in the new place. And at first, she simply appreciated it. It was really easier that way. But of course, in order not to lower her professional dignity, she pretended that she could handle everything perfectly well herself. Kate was used to being strong. Life had taught her that. Already at the age of 7, she knew that she was a foster child. Her mother died in childbirth, her father was unknown, but fate, as they call it, smiled and she fell to a married couple, which because of health problems desperate to have a child. They were quite wealthy people who were able to take care that little Kate did not need anything. And they also adhered to the principle that a child is like a small adult and therefore brought up Kate, as they themselves said, without pink snot, in strictness, responsibility, a lot of responsibilities. Kate graduated from school as an excellent student, then entered the university, paid, studying, and studying again. What's with all the romance and student nonsense? They'd tear her head off for that. Yes, she knew it was forbidden fruit for her. She'd only fallen off the wagon once. That was with a boy she'd met in a restaurant. And no, he wasn't an imposing stranger who, after catching a glimpse of the beautiful girl at the next table, sends her a dessert as a gift. He was a waiter, word for word. He, bringing the bill, put a napkin on the tray where he scribbled his phone number. She called. Of course, Kate had hoped to keep this affair a secret. But no such luck. Her mom's friend caught the couple walking in the park, rollerblading and laughing themselves silly. And everything would have been fine yet. Maybe. But that friend overheard Kate talking to the young man about the night they spent together. Yeah, they had a thing. Kate didn't get her head ripped off, but they gave her such a beating, such a workout that she got hysterical and had to call an ambulance. The doctor in the ambulance, by the way, literally twisted his finger at his temple and said that the girl an adult, her boyfriend too, which means that such an interference in the private lives of young people from parents, even if they are concerned, but it already gives off abnormality and will lead in the future to the fact that grandchildren will not wait for grandchildren. The doctor, of course, nobody listened to him. And when he left, saying that the girl's heart was shaky because she was roaring a lot, she was again seriously talked to. Kate's foster father threatened that he had connections and he would arrange such a life for her suitor. Kate didn't want that at all, so she told the guy they had to break up. And he shrugged and said, okay, so be it. They were good together, they were cool. It was a blow to Kate. She thought they were in love, I guess. And that was her first and last disappointment, her first and last romantic adventure. Then, to the delight of her parents, she got smart. Then she went to work in tourism. And having established herself there, having proved herself well, she went to get a second higher education. Because knowledge, as her father said, there is no such thing as too much. And here, she was already a few over 30 years old, and what she has already achieved. Transferred to work abroad. There is money for branded business suits. There is respect, authority. There is everything. And only recently Kate realized with surprise and horror what lies at the heart of that strange, stifling, as if pinching feeling that sometimes visits her. She suddenly realized why she's so unpleasant to look at the cute couples on the streets, why she irritates all romantic comedies and melodramas about family values. She realized that the reason she reacted the way she did was because she missed it herself. And such a revelation wasn't happy. It was like the red warning lights announcing that our starship Lilith had crash-landed on an unknown planet, and it wasn't according to plan because we needed to conquer space. Kate convinced herself that she didn't need any of this. Career, stability, and feelings, romances. Oh, it can only cause problems in her life. She won't be able to tear herself into two spheres of life. Need to have time for everything. Here a little more will build a career and then. But Kate's very being, something hidden deep in her and slumbering for many years, now as if awakened and shouted that no, you can no longer put off life for later. That it is necessary, as ere it is necessary ordinary such female happiness. And such mental contradictions pissed Kate off. She had other plans, and this transfer to a new place of work. And so it was during this difficult time that she met Nicky, and she missed the moment when she fell in love. For the first time in her life. I don't care if he had a wedding ring on his finger. So Kate started dropping hints to Nicky. As best she could, she'd call him into her office and praise him for his work. She'd give him a bonus out of the blue. That invited together to eat together in a business lunch and talk as if about business. She even tried to undo an extra button on his blouse and sprayed expensive sweet perfume, which were called Temptation of the Mermaid. But Nicky was blind, or was he very resistant? Kate felt so stupid and blamed herself for just not knowing how to be in a relationship. How she envied her young subordinates, all those girls who only thought that instead of giving their best at work, it was to run around drinking coffee, discussing outfits and men. How experienced they must have been, all of them. And then Kate made up her mind. She called Nikki to her office and, sitting at the table in an expensive leather executive chair, she suddenly switched to you and announced that she was partial to him. Said she liked him as a man. "I'm sorry, Kate," Nikki said. "But you know, I'm a married man." She was so hurt, so offended, and it was as if Kate's mind had split in two. Yes, she realized that he was not behaving logically, that his heart was not free, and she should start behaving like a grown-up, established woman, not like a flighty girl. But on the other hand, Kate couldn't accept rejection. She felt as if Nikki was the last man on earth and losing him would mean eternal defeat for her. And though her love for him had quietly begun to melt away, what remained was resentment, muffled irritation, and this dangerous cocktail was now in a state similar to that of a volcano's lava before a catastrophic eruption. "She looks like me," thought Kate, appraising Nikki's wife with that look which only a jealous woman can use to appraise a mercilessly jealous woman. They were about the same height, but Lillian was about 5 years older, that was for sure. Both had black hair, but Kate's skin was much lighter. And surely, Kate thought, she wouldn't have let herself get so shapely. Does this woman even know what a gym is? No, Lillian wasn't fat or even full, but she should definitely lose some weight in her arms and legs. But she thought with a wry smile, let her eat like crazy. Maybe then Nikki would realize that there are other women in the world. "Honey, when are we?" Nikki carefully tried to address his wife to find out when she was going to do what they came here to do, but she threw him such a look that he decided that for his own health and life it would be better to shut up and to leave her alone with the almost empty tray of stuffed eggs. In fact, it was not a good idea to go to a corporate event like this, but Lillian had somehow decided that it would look the most natural and right to begin with. And who was he to argue? Although, to be honest, he wished he was away from all this in the first place. No, it wasn't that he regretted meeting Lillian. That was impossible in principle. He loved her with all his soul, but couldn't fate have arranged it so that his life would be less complicated and less of a mess like this? And he? No, he was not at all prepared to be in the center of it. "Don't rush me," his wife answered him with her mouth full. "I'm nervous," she explained, gesticulating vigorously. "And when I'm nervous..." I know. Nikki nodded. "You lose control. But please, not here and not now, okay, sunshine? I got work to do." "You've got work to do," Lillian rolled her eyes. "It's boring. Selling tourists something they don't need at all, just to charge more. You deserve more and are capable of much more." "And now I can lose my temper." Nikki tried to pretend strictness in his voice, but he understood well that Lillian couldn't do that. She knew him too well. And she had already seen what he was capable of. To be more precise, what he wasn't capable of. To this day, when he remembered, so goosebumps, and he felt like a disgraced lowlife. "Let me just introduce you, okay? It's just a formality," Nikki said, "and basically the beginning will be laid. And then you can meet again, maybe, as if even by chance. She, for example, shopping, likes to go shopping, and you could." "Can you imagine me shopping in boutiques?" snorted Lillian, and Nikki had to agree. No, all this lady stuff. It's definitely not about his wife. He barely talked her into that dress, while she insisted that there could be no dress code for a corporate party in a small company, and therefore she had the right to come in her favorite jeans and a black t-shirt, if she so desired and comfortable. "Okay, I agree. Bad idea," Nikki sighed. "But you said it yourself, there's not much time." He did not finish, because he noticed that the object of discussion, that is, Kate, was coming to them. For Nikki, in principle, it was no secret how exactly the boss continues to treat him even after he refused her. And this, Nikki knew exactly, repeatedly complicates the task, which before him shockingly opened some time ago. Lillian. To think, Nikki thought nothing had even started yet, and already it was so complicated. What will happen next? "I see you decided to introduce us to your other half after all," Kate said in English and smiled sweetly at Lillian. "It's a pleasure to meet you." And then, looking at Nikki, added in Russian, "You even understand English?" "No offense, but everyone knows what a low level on the islands." "Do not worry. I speak fluent English," said Lillian suddenly in Russian, "and I understand your language. I also speak Spanish, Portuguese, French, Chinese. Kate almost choked on her cocktail. What a surprise, I didn't expect it. But she had no intention of giving up, and she certainly wasn't going to tolerate such a snide and deeply scrutinizing look. It was like Lillian was looking into her soul. And then Kate noticed something, and inwardly rejoiced. "What a lovely dress," she said rather loudly. She continued and named a brand that was not mega popular or high-end, but was somewhat famous in these parts. "Very nice. It's made from recycled plastic, right? And this dress could have been made." It turns out Kate continued only when she was sure that the people at the corporate party were listening to their little company. "It could have been made out of garbage bags, right? You'd never know, it really suits you." She finished with a triumphant smile. Lillian's expression changed, her eyes narrowed, and a blush appeared on her cheeks. Someone present at the corporate party giggled. Nicky realized it too. He also blushed. "Honey, we have more. We need to go to your family," he mumbled awkwardly. "You seem to know a lot about waste. Is that a specialty or a hobby?" Lillian asked. The audience, apparently warmed by the previous joke, jumped, and now Kate felt hurt. And most importantly, she didn't know what to say. And that was just awful. Meanwhile, Lillian approached her and, looking intently into her eyes, quietly said a phrase. It was in Spanish and it was hardly heard by anyone else but the two women. Kate, as soon as she heard it, felt her breath catch. "It's very nice here, isn't it?" Lillian said with a smile. "The stuffed eggs are delicious," she added, taking her husband under her arm. "We really must be going, darling." Kate looked at the couple. She didn't feel well. It was as if the world around her had lost its reality. "Kate." Boris, the head of security, flew up to her. "Are you all right? Why don't you sit down?" And Kate did sit down on the nearest chair, her legs shaking. Someone handed her a glass of water. "And all these cocktails," Peggy said in an expert tone. "They get drunk and..." "So non-alcoholic," squeaked another girl employee who was the best at writing advertising texts. "Anyway," Peggy said, "they have these exotic fruits in them. They sometimes cause such reactions." The corporate party was to last more than an hour, and Kate, a little out of breath, bravely endured it. But her mind kept returning to what had been said. What was that? How was this even possible? She knew that short phrase, which translated from the Spanish as "Rose of my heart," "May you bloom long." It was basically the only thing she'd ever gotten from her mother. And only when Kate returned to her small apartment after the corporate party, she was able to think about everything once again. Or to be more precise, to return to the bitter, confusing memories of her childhood. Yes, she knew she was adopted. Her parents didn't make it a secret, but they didn't talk about it much either. They just, once they'd stated the fact, and then live with it, child. But when Kate turned 16, her foster mom said she had something to pass on. Something to pass on to Kate from her real mom. She said it was time to find out the truth. That is, what the foster parents knew. She was from an orphanage. Orphan, that's what Kate heard then. Except when she graduated, she was looking for an easy life. It turned out that Kate's real mom went abroad, wanted to become a model. But after a while, she returned almost without money, but pregnant, and quickly acquired bad habits. Threw them and lost the apartment, wrote off to some black realtors. In general, she ended up on the street, and then Kate was born. That's the name her real mom gave her. And also asked her to give those who would eventually take care of her daughter the last value, that she had a gold pendant. She kept it safe, didn't sell it, no matter how bad things got. This girl, who ended her life so early in a difficult birth, after which she stayed in this world for a little more than a day, she knew that she was parting with her daughter forever. But it seems she loved her very much. In the present tense, and her own, 16-year-old Kate took the pendant in her cup-folded palms and, dropping tears on it, could barely make out the engraved inscription. Her foster mom explained that it was Spanish and also gave a translation. And that phrase crashed into Kate's memory as if it had been imprinted, as if it was the most important thing she could possibly know. And also, as strange surprising as it was to herself at times, she had never sought to know who her father had been. It didn't seem important. But she assumed it was probably some foreigner who took advantage of the young naivety of a beautiful model. And he was not around when she was carrying a child under her heart. Probably because he just didn't care. Kate accepted that bitter truth. And all these years, she thought sometimes about the fact that she had no mother and regretted it. But about her father? No, she thought nothing at all. And right now in the present, after the corporate party, Kate couldn't understand what it was. Why had Nikki's wife said that phrase to her? How did she even know it? No, theoretically it was logical to assume that there were hundreds of such pendants made at one time, or maybe it was a line from a play, but how strange it was. And as she went to bed with a terrible headache that no pills seemed to relieve, Kate thought that now she had to find Lillian again and ask her, why did she say that? Oh yes, Kate thought, she'd still have to apologize to her. She'd acted like a complete idiot and made herself look like one. After all, Kate thought, this man, Nicky, he never belonged to her, so can't she stop suffering so much for him? After all, she wasn't a young fool. Yes, that's it. It's done, Lillian said after listening to something important that the man on the phone had said to her. Change of plans, she informed her husband. The couple sat on the veranda at the table and had breakfast. Nicky had just picked up a full fork, a piece of scrambled eggs, a strip of bacon oozing fragrant fat, some beans and tomato sauce. He was going to pick it up with ruddy toast. And he never got it all to his mouth, because Lillian had told her husband exactly how the plans had changed. No, Nicky exclaimed so that the peacock walking on the lawn was frightened and jumped up, almost stepping on his own tail. I didn't sign up for this. What the? He noisily pushed back his chair, the legs scraping on the marble floor, and stood up, pacing from side to side. He didn't like all this. He didn't like a lot of things lately. Not excluding that peacock. His eyes would not have seen it, but it was, you see, a gift from Lillian's maternal uncle, and he had to accept it, lest he should be offended. But there was naturally something in the present circumstances that Nicky liked. Very much so. When he came here, he thought that it would not last long. He thought that he wants an ordinary provincial manager, just very lucky that he managed to find a job abroad, and even in such a travel agency. And he was afraid. Afraid at any moment to show his lack of competence and that he would be fired for it. And then he met her. Well, as met. In fact, terribly stupid, dangerous, and in some ways even funny story turned out. Something in the spirit of Hollywood action movies. It's just that one day Nicky was tempted to make money on the side. In general, he knew that if you are called abroad to move something and somewhere, then the story of this in a large percentage of probability has an illegal criminal connotation. But at that moment his parents called from home. His mother said that his father again crashed the car, that it would need repair, and she herself is tired of sitting in the city and wants to rest in a sanatorium. Nicky's parents, no matter what he told them, were convinced that abroad is always a lot of money. On the girls all down and play cards. Scolded Mom when Nicky tried to explain that there is no money. How his mother even came up with the version with girls and cards Nicky did not know. He had never suffered from such vices in his life, but money and really needed urgently, so he agreed. At the appointed place they handed over the bag. Then he got on the boat, which was driven by some smiling and constantly chewing gum guy. It was not far to sail, but in the middle of the ocean they were suddenly caught up by another boat and Nicky was grabbed by some armed types. He yelled that he had nothing to do with it, nothing at all. But they put him nose down on the deck and said that he was very much involved since he was transporting stolen paintings worth $1 million. And then she showed up on the boat, Lillian. Turns out the theft was from her uncle. Hey, you want to save your ass, kid? She asked, and he, squinting because he was facing the sun, nodded hastily. He also thought he'd never met a more beautiful woman. Lillian said he would go with her and point out the man who had handed him the bag. It turned out that the paintings had been stolen from an art gallery owned by Lillian's uncle. A couple days later, Nicky and Lillian went to a reception. A fancy one, where all the ladies wore evening gowns and the men wore tuxedos. Nikki had to pose as her date and was sweating profusely for fear of being exposed. Lillian cursed the heels, but looked very cute in a black dress. She couldn't stand such clothes, and the only evening dress she had in her closet that she was wearing right now was a little black dress made of eco-correct modern material. And then... Anyway, Nikki had pointed out the right man. And then Lillian started talking to him. Then somehow it turned out that the man tried to shoot at them, and it turned out that Lillian had hand-to-hand combat techniques that a kung fu master would envy. It also turns out that she knows how to steal cars and race them on the road. And then, at the end of this incredible evening, or rather night, Lillian kissed Nikki herself. They sat on the pier, dangling their bare feet in the water and chatting about everything in the glow of the rising sun. After that, they just started dating. In general, Nikki felt himself very much a man so strong, virile. But next to Lillian became a helpless boy, therefore, and accepted this invitation to live in her territory. But he didn't give up his work. Although she kept saying that it was time because, for example, her uncle could find him a better job. And now, on the veranda, in the morning, which seemed to have been created only to indulge in lazy rest on the islands, Nikki again acutely felt out of place. "I'm sorry," he said, "but normal people do not get into a relationship like this grabbing a gun." "My uncle." "I know what you say," Nikki snorted, although, in principle, he did not allow himself such a common thing as interrupting his wife. That he is a man of the old school. But let's be clear, mafia-hardened line. Yes, his father was from Sicily, and don't lie to me that he grew oranges there. And why not? Lillian smiled slyly. He did grow a lot of things, and he was just a respectable man. No one proved that he was part of the family. Nikki muttered to himself, who was once again in that peculiar state of mind where he was beginning to think that the family fortune of Lillian's kin had not been gained in an honest way. However, most of the time Nikki believed his beloved, and himself called paranoid, which simply in his mind has too many stamped ideas about the Italian mafia and the fact that its networks spread almost all over the world, not excluding and the Caribbean islands. "That's what I'm saying," Nikki continued. "Let's just do this the normal way, okay? Just talk to her and you'll convince her." "Do you like her?" the wife asked. Lillian folded her arms across her chest and smiled mockingly. Nikki stopped walking, opened his mouth and stared at her in amazement. "What? You suspect me?" "I'm sorry, but I had to shake you up." She stood up, stepped towards him, threw her arms around his shoulders and kissed him sweetly. "You're walking around like a caged animal. It's impossible to watch. You know, I'm sorry that you got caught up in all these family squabbles. And believe me, I wish it was anyone but your snow queen. But I think there's a saying that you can't pick your relatives, right?" Kate didn't believe in luck, karma, fate, or anything like that. But today in particular, she was ready to believe that fortune had turned her back. First, a large fine had come from a local service. Allegedly, her tour company had taken tourists on a tour of some ruined 17th century fort that was closed to the public. Second, a group of tourists who had flown in the day before yesterday were found to have a rare local fever outrage. People were forced to hole up in hotel rooms and had to scramble to sort things out with the local insurance company. And thirdly, when Kate was halfway to the office of her travel agency, her heel broke right in the middle of the street, and she almost broke her leg that way. And how, one might ask, after that was she not to consider herself the unluckiest person in the world? And then, just within a few minutes, two things happened in succession. First, a man, obviously a local, stopped near Kate. He addressed her by her first name and said that there was a conversation for her. "And who are you from?" "What else is wrong?" replied the young woman, at that time taking off her shoe from the second foot and thinking that in order not to knock her bare feet on the stone sidewalk, it would be necessary to buy something quickly. At least those rubber flip-flops, maybe? And then she looked up and frowned, because the stranger's face was hidden under a mask with slits only for his eyes and mouth. Instead of answering, the man pulled something from the waistband of his wide pants. Kate didn't immediately understand why people, Other passers-by on the sidewalk suddenly screamed, squealed, and scattered. Then she realized she had a gun pointed at her. "Sandro sends his regards. Burn in hell," bellowed the apparent villain. Kate had never thought about what was meant by the expression that say, in moments of mortal danger, all life flashes before the eyes. But right now she remembered it in half a second. And for half a second she realized with astonishment that she had not remembered all her life, but had been thinking about something stupid. About the fact that the omelet she had for breakfast was too salty. And about the fact that she is not satisfied with the main character at the end of the TV series Tropical Passion. And the second event was an unexpected rescue. Just that rumbled shot, and suddenly on the type with a gun came like lightning dark shadow. It literally knocked him off his feet, knocked the weapon out of his hands. At the same time, brakes squealed. A red sports car stopped abruptly at the sidewalk. "Now!" Jumped the dark-haired young woman behind the wheel shouted. Kate didn't have time to wonder if it was Lillian. Driven by some strange feeling, she simply obeyed, almost collapsed through the open door into the passenger seat. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed that another man had jumped into the back seat, the one who had just neutralized the bandit with the gun. The bandit, by the way, very quickly got out of the grip and rushed into the alley, and there jumped on the motorcycle waiting for him and fled in the distance. The car went so sharply at a brutal speed that Kate was literally squeezed into the back of the passenger seat. "Shut up and listen," Lillian told her, though Kate opened her mouth to catch her breath, not to speak. "Your life is in grave danger. I'm the only one who can save you. Well, and some other people from my family. You will listen to me. There's no other option." Kate was so stunned, she nodded. Then she frowned. A couple of seconds in safety, seemingly in safety, was enough time for one question to flash in her brain like a red beacon. "What's going on?" "My ex." Archie. Lillian jabbed a finger back. Kate glanced over her shoulder from the back seat. She was smiling at an attractive, blue-eyed, brown-haired man, whose appearance, inappropriately, reminded her of France and all those romantic heroes like the Musketeers. The car was speeding through the streets. A thought flashed through the back of Kate's mind. It seemed they had broken a lot of traffic laws. But what did it matter if she had just almost been killed? Ooh, why was I shot? Kate was hysterical. Tears were rolling from her eyes. Her body was shaking violently. "It's a long story," Lillian replied, gripping the steering wheel tighter and clenching her teeth. "And you won't like it." "Can you be more specific?" Kate shouted. "Let Lillian drive, or we're going to hit a wall," Archie said softly. And it was strange, but somehow his low voice was soothing. Kate covered her eyes and tried to calm down and just focus on the beating of her heart. And then they finally arrived. It was a suburb. And not a poor one. The houses that stood here had green, neat lawns. Flower beds were freshly renovated. Lillian opened the gate, drove into the grounds of her house, and parked the car. "Nicky, why is he here?" "Oh yes," Kate sighed. "He's your husband." "It just happened," Lillian grinned. "Believe me, I don't like it sometimes. I'm not going to get out of here until someone tells me what's going on." Kate folded her arms across her chest. "You're not going to sit down at the table. Are you going to stand there barefoot?" Lillian asked. "Maybe you'll have an iced tea with lemon? You're standing in the sun." To follow the advice of the man who had just saved your life, there was a grain of reasonableness in it, and so Kate went to the veranda and sat down at the table. "Good afternoon," Kate said. Nicky, who was sitting there. "I to solve questions," Archie threw, unclear about what and when, into the house. "So we'll have to start very far away," said Lillian, pouring a drink with mint leaves from a tall, clear decanter into glasses. And she began to talk. But first she asked Kate not to ask questions and just to listen. Lillian began with Kate's mother, Cindy. She was indeed a talented young model and would have had a great future ahead of her. Except, her agent abroad turned out to be a man with a dirty hand. He believed that much more can be earned by supplying girls not only for shows and advertising shoots, and as an escort. He acted skillfully. Some were drawn into the dirty business with promises of fabulous money. Others were cleverly driven into debt and hinted that there was only one way to pay back. Cindy got into the disgusting business the second way. She didn't want it. But the agent was a skillful manipulator and soon turned her into his obedient puppet. And one day the girl, along with several other beautiful models, found herself in the villa of an influential man. Here young nymphs in evening gowns had to, as they were told, create the appropriate captivating atmosphere, well, and if possible, entertain the guests as they pleased. That night was Cindy's last. She had a nervous breakdown. But she was lucky in a way. She was attracted to only one person in the villa, the owner himself. She had to, let's say, sleep with him, and something attracted him. He paid the agent enough money to keep Cindy from working. He said he wanted to keep seeing her. He was fascinated, and he was ready to shower her with expensive gifts. But none of that mattered to her. And she was lucky some of the girls, who worked quite voluntarily, felt sorry for her and lent her money to buy her tickets home and helped her steal her passport, which the agent kept in his possession. So Cindy returned to her hometown and got pregnant. In general, girls after such trips were supposed to take special pills in the morning, but Cindy missed it, apparently because of the terrible stress. Kate sat with her head down. Her chest was tight, and she thought it was very stuffy in the garden, though on the contrary, there was a refreshing breeze blowing in the shade. And I always knew that I had no father, she said. I always knew he was a bastard. He liked her, didn't he? And he couldn't understand that the poor girl didn't want to sleep with him, that she was forced to work. He was trying to buy her. He was just trying to buy her. I hope that monster is dead, she exclaimed in her heart. He did die. His heart failed, Lillian continued calmly. But only 2 years ago, his name was Santiago Fernandez, and he owned a company that made yachts, 2 other banks in Argentina and Chile. He died knowing he had a daughter, a second daughter. He barely had time to find you. He was told about everything by the private detective he hired when he decided to try again to find out everything about Cindy's fate. At those words, Kate looked up. Santiago was my father, Lillian said, looking her in the eye. My mother was luckier than yours, she was his wife. But Lillian grinned bitterly. I suspect he didn't love her any more than he loved Cindy. I mean, he cheated on her all the time. And yet, the fact is, he was my father too. You're my sister. This obvious information came to Kate with frightening slowness. But even when it did, it didn't quite make sense. It all seemed like some kind of illusion, unreal. A sister-in-law, Lillian nodded. And that phrase, I said it because I snapped. You see, Santiago gave Cindy a locket, just like the one he gave my mom back in the day. He could have given diamonds, of course. But the men in our family before him had given the same kind of thing to their wives and favorites, let's say. My great-great-grandfather, for instance, and his father, who, by the way, was a slave owner. Kate sighed convulsively. Your father's side of the family, isn't it? Lillian was no longer smiling. And now we come to the main point. They want to kill you. And so am I. Because Santiago, as you can guess, was a man of complex and rotten character. So he had plenty of enemies. And apparently someone decided that since Santiago had been taken to the underworld, it was time to send his daughters, his heiresses, there as well. Wait, what heiress? Kate squeezed her eyes shut, rubbed her temples. I don't want anything from him, not a penny. Do you think anyone would believe that? And even if they did, you're his daughter, a desirable target for some people who want revenge. And you? Did they try to shoot you too? Kate asked cautiously. No, they tried to throw me to the sharks last year, but I think it was different people, not the ones who booked you. What? Nikki, who hadn't interfered in the conversation before, knocked over a cup of tea. You didn't tell me what? At that time, we didn't know each other yet, dear, Lillian explained. And then, I'm sorry, but in some cases you're no more useful than a teddy bear or a fat turkey. So, that particular guy with the hungry shark fantasy is no longer dangerous. I've dealt with him. I don't want to know how Nikki mumbled, clearly offended at being belittled. Not so you can worry about it, Lillian replied cryptically and returned her attention back to Kate. So, since you're being hunted, I guess I'll have to take care of you now. You're going to live with me. I'll keep an eye on you until things get clearer. And we'll find out who's behind this. I guess right now there's just one hunter. But I can't. Kate said, "No, listen. Leave me out of this, I can't. I have a job. I have a life. And you. That's enough." She jumped up from the table and strode across the lawn toward the gate. "This has nothing to do with me. And I don't want any inheritance. I'm going to the police. And then I'm going to the office. Without me, everything will fall apart." Oh, Kate almost ran into a peacock coming out of the bushes. The bird was also frightened by the unexpected meeting and shrieked shrilly, not at all melodious. "You're lucky," came Lillian's voice in the back. "You had loving parents, your adoptive parents. You know who I had? A father who took easy girls to the house my whole childhood, and a mother who drowned out his infidelities with alcohol. You want to leave? Go on, get out. But if you don't wake up tomorrow morning because you got shot in the temple last night, you have only yourself to blame." Kate stopped. Colored spots danced before her eyes. How was it that her prosperous, measured, successful life had suddenly crumbled in an instant? How was it that the past, which she had so hoped was buried forever, now rose again and loomed like a menacing shadow over her present? Kate realized she would sell her soul right now just to go back a few days and live as she had before, just quietly go about each day in her usual style and be happy about it. However, reality was certain, and she had no choice but to accept it. Kate returned to the veranda. I wanted to come over and tell you quietly. To give you time to get used to the situation," Lillian continued in a much more even tone. "But as you've seen for yourself, the situation almost got out of hand. So I had to dump it all on you at once." "All right. I'll do it. What about the authorities? Did you go to the police?" "Yes," Lillian nodded. "But I'm afraid whoever wants to take revenge on Santiago has quite powerful friends. No one and nothing will be found that easily, believe me. But luckily, we have Archie." "Your ex?" Kate raised an eyebrow. "The best of my exes," Lillian smiled. "Nicky, no offense, you know what I mean. He's a private detective. Before that, he was special forces. He's helping me out." "Old friendship?" Kate didn't want to make fun of Nicky, but somehow it just worked itself out. "It's okay with you," she said to him. "Your wife's ex-boyfriend hanging around. First of all, I trust my wife. And secondly, do I have a choice?" He's throwing up his hands. "Without Archie, I think Lillian would have been gone long ago. He has connections." "Criminal," said Kate, who could have sworn she felt more and more like she was in a Hollywood action movie, and one had to wonder if the screenwriter had written a happy ending. "What do you need?" Lillian said with pressure. "Be kind, stay out of it. All you have to do is to sit quietly and not interfere with our work on this case." I see. Kate sighed. "Will I live here? Good. I'll have to go and get my things. And yes, I need to go to the office. I guess I could take a couple days off. I'll say I'm sick, but I can't just leave it there." "A lousy team?" Lillian asked sympathetically. "No," Kate smiled. "Those who work for me, they are good people. But I'm a perfectionist and I'm used to being in control. By the way, how did you know I had to be rescued? How did you end up in that alley in the first place?" "You see, I have a couple of informants," Lillian sighed. "Not very reliable, but sometimes they can be useful. And they tell me that you've been followed for days by some strange types. And that, of course, hinted at something bad. And then, well, they told me that someone had been following you since early morning, as if waiting for an opportunity. So Archie and I decided it was time to act, and the best thing to do was to warn you, to tell you the truth at once. And as you can see, we got there just in time." Finally, we agreed that Archie would take Kate to the office and then to her house to get her things. Lillian mentioned a man with a gun. Archie had passed the information about him to the police, but the police said that since he was wearing a mask and there were no working CCTV cameras anywhere, It was unlikely that they'd be able to find him. "Peggy, you're in charge," said Kate, handing the dazed senior accountant the keys to her own office. "And what are you sick?" she asked. "Is it serious?" "Reef stingray infection," Archie said nonchalantly, before Kate could open her mouth to tell a prepared lie about general malaise and fatigue. "An extremely rare disease," he added sympathetically and clucked his tongue. "Bought it at that party, I guess," he said, giving Kate a meaningful look. "Oh, baby, I should have watched you better, but now it's just rest and serious treatment." "Isn't it contagious?" shrieked Peggy, who was literally devouring the stately Archie with her eyes and had already decided that there was something and a lot between him and the boss. "No, there isn't. But the poor girl will have to strictly follow all the doctor's recommendations." Archie took a strand of hair away from Kate's face with care, and she almost bit his hand for such insolence. "But don't worry, Mrs., he added. "Actually, I'm not married." Peggy blushed deeply and flirtatiously flashed her eyes. "Oh, I'm sorry. Don't worry, miss. I'll look after Kate and take care of her." Kate left the Phoenix travel agency office feeling like she was at the epicenter of a very diverse and inescapable gossip. "What the hell are you doing?" she lashed out at Archie. "Are you insane? What do you think you're doing?" "Well, I'm just doing my job," he shrugged, and then, suddenly moving closer to her, he grasped her chin with his fingers and brought his face close to hers. "Maybe I'm not crazy about you either. You're so cold. But it's better for us if everyone thinks we're together. It's just that a friendship between a posh man and a woman isn't exactly believable, is it?" "Classy?" Kate broke free of his grip. It was unbearable, because it sent a strange thrill through her body. "Who told you that? You're just impossible, arrogant, pompous. And devilishly attractive, aren't you?" Archie grinned, putting his sunglasses back on his face. "Let's go get your stuff." Kate was determined that she wasn't going to let that guy treat her like that anymore, and she didn't care that he was really, really attractive. They got to Kate's apartment without adventure, and she packed her things without forgetting anything. Now Archie was ignoring her on purpose, and deliberately, well, of course, deliberately flirting with the same milkshake seller. Finally, back at Lillian's house, all four of them had dinner, and luckily they talked about distracted topics at the table. And it turned out, by the way, that Lillian was a very good cook. The main course was something like pilaf with seafood and spicy vegetables. "I know you're not thrilled with your new sister," she said as she walked Kate to her room. "And neither am I, so no pajama parties. But let's get this straight. I'm the big boss, and you happen to be my everything, okay?" "Okay," Kate agreed tiredly, wanting more than anything in the world right now to be alone. And she decided that, as it happened, she might as well get a good night's sleep in the next few days. But Lillian disappointed her by telling her that tomorrow they would have to go to a place. "Where?" Kate asked. "Oh, you'll love it. I think it'll be the easiest thing we've ever done. Now, good night, sister." The next morning started with the realization that it wasn't a nightmare at all. Kate covered her head with a pillow. How unlucky she was. "Good morning, sister." Lillian came into the room, after another, and what must have been the 10th, knock, and unceremoniously threw some things at Kate, who was curled up on the bed. "I was calling you to come down for breakfast, by the way. I'm not hungry. And I told you we had to get ready. So, get dressed now and come with us." "But why?" Kate frowned. "Can't I stay safely in your house?" "You can." Lillian nodded. "I have a good security system here, but I think a little adventure would be good for us. We'll have a little fun, and we'll get to know each other." "I don't want to look at you," exclaimed Kate, and then she was immediately embarrassed, realizing that she was acting like a capricious little child. "I'm sorry, it's not about you, it's about all of this. And I can't get used to having a relative. In fact, when this is over, I'm probably going to fly out of here." "That's up to you," Lillian shrugged. "I don't want to be a relative either, you know. Get dressed." With a grim assent, Kate shoved her sister out of the room and began to clean herself up. "This looks strange," she said, 15 minutes later when she came downstairs. And she noted that Archie and Lillian were dressed the same way, in sandy green shorts and shirts, brightly colored scarves tied around their necks, and comfortable shoes on their feet. "We look like jungle fighters," Kate said. "Why is he dressed normally?" She jabbed her finger at Nikki, who was wearing jeans and a t-shirt. "He's staying home. And we're going to the Black Unicorn Wildlife Rehabilitation Center." Why? It seemed to Kate that the further she went, the less she understood. You see, Lillian squinted. "Today he is to be visited by a man. His name is Roger Smith. He's a millionaire. He made his fortune in mining, but as you know, it's not good for nature. And now, to improve his reputation, he actively donates money to various foundations. He will visit the center today, and it's a great opportunity." For what? Kate began to suspect a dangerous venture. To install a wiretap, Lillian shrugged her shoulders. "Tonight he's going to meet a guy. This guy and Roger have always been Santiago's enemies. I think that if they are involved in the attempted assassination of you, they will definitely talk about it when they meet at the men's club for a drink. So why the eyes? Don't worry, it won't take much from you." Lillian grinned. "I wouldn't trust you with anything serious anyway, no offense. But you'll serve as a distraction. I think you can handle that simple role. Just talk to him when he's around. You can make eye contact." "Why are we going to be in this center looking like this? Did you forge their employee IDs? Kate exhaled. "We're not that bad," Archie exclaimed with exaggerated offense. "No. Lillian's actually been going to this center for years, and she got me into it for company while we were together. And you're a guest volunteer today, as our friend. So it's legit." "Except for following some mobster," Kate grumbled. "That's definitely not legal." The Center for Rehabilitation of All Kinds of Tropical Animals was located in a picturesque place. First they drove uphill, and then Kate was breathless. The view was so open. The dense jungle, stretching, it seemed, to the horizon, because this organization, in fact, its territory was adjacent to the reserve, seemed like a magic emerald carpet. The sea was visible, but it was shrouded in a light misty haze. The air here was unusually clean and filled with rich, tropical scents. For the first time, Kate thought about the fact that she had been in Jamaica for so long. In fact, she had been working and working, but had never had time to get acquainted with the local beauty of nature, cultural and historical monuments, and local colorful life in general. And she promised herself that if she got out of this story safely, she would definitely correct this mistake. But at last the car drove through the gate. The little company was there. Kate kept to herself while Lillian and Archie chatted cheerfully with the employees, who seemed glad to see their old acquaintances. "Come on. We have something special for the new girl." The mulatto girl smiled and beckoned Kate to follow. As they walked through the center, Kate cast curious glances around. She noticed a large, low room, and it was explained to her that it housed the center's administration, its own mini veterinary clinic, and indoor facilities for keeping some of the animals, plus classrooms where school children and anyone else who wanted to come sometimes came to listen to lectures about wildlife. "This way," said the mulatto woman, who introduced herself as Kelly and opened the door to a high, netted enclosure. "Who lives here?" Kate asked, looking around suspiciously. "Lemurs," Kelly said, and suddenly handed Kate the bucket she had been carrying. There was fruit in the bucket. "Archie said you've had experience feeding wild animals before?" Kate mumbled something vague. Strictly speaking, all her experience in feeding wild animals had been limited to throwing bread to the ducks in the park, but it seemed to have been decided for her. "They'll be right out," Letty smiled. "You squat down and just give them the fruit. They're so full, it's lunch and a treat." "Well, have fun," she winked at Kate, who almost shouted, "No, don't leave me here alone." At the departing ones. But the others had already left. Only Archie said, "We'll be right back," and gave a thumbs up, saying, "Hang in there." Kate stood quietly for a few minutes listening. It seemed to her that she was all alone in the enclosure. But then, Somewhere above her head, branches rustled, and raising her head, Kate met the gaze of round yellow and hungry eyes. "Hello," she said. "Don't you bite?" Roger Smith arrived at the Wild Animal Rehabilitation Center at exactly the right time, accompanied by a journalist from a publication that was ready to present his person in the best light. In general, he hated all those animals, unless they were served on the table or decorated his office as hunting trophies. But now he had to pretend that he cared a great deal about all this snotty fuss about protecting the environment. Roger Smith flashed a smile as he greeted the center's staff who welcomed him. He listened to their story about the place, himself saying a few prepared phrases that had been put together by his public relations specialist. Then he handed the center a check for a substantial sum of money and breathed a sigh of relief. The sightseeing tour was over, and he could get out of this place where a bunch of losers were aimlessly wasting their time. It wasn't as scary as Kate had thought. The lemurs came out of their huts and shelters gradually. They were cautious after all. A stranger had come in. But slowly the animals became bolder. Sweet, ripe fruit beckoned to them. Kate held her breath when the tiny paws of a lemur took a slice of mango from her palm. It was a magical feeling. "Come on, there's enough for everyone," she smiled. It was a magical moment. Kate had never imagined that there could be anything as tender and exciting as hand-feeding lemurs. But as the animals grew bolder, they became more daring and even brazen. And they also seemed to sense that Kate was a complete novice at handling them. "Excuse me," she said, glancing apprehensively at the bottom of the pail, where there was only a little fruit left. "I think we're done with the treats." The lemur's eyes were on her from all sides. The animals literally surrounded the young woman, and when she tried to get up and go to the exit of the enclosure, she found that they did not want to let her go. One lemur was spinning under her feet like a cat with its tail up, and another lemur was jumping up and down as if it wanted to catch her. Kate felt a little bit trapped, and even though they were not predators but just lemurs, but there were many of them, and how they were coming. Kate looked helplessly through the mesh walls of the enclosure. Where were Archie and Lillian? Why? Why did they leave her here? "This is where the lemurs live," Kelly said as she led Mr. Smith around the center. The main element of the plan was that Mr. Smith should never meet Lillian because he knew her by sight. In theory, he would have easily believed that she was working here for free out of the goodness of her heart. But Archie said it was in Smith's blood, almost an instinct, to be extremely cautious. And if he was really plotting something against Lillian, he would be doubly careful around her. But he didn't know Archie by sight. So Lillian was to step aside for the time being, for there was always room to go off on business in the center, but Archie was to walk around with the rest of the entourage that would accompany Roger, waiting for the opportune moment to attach a miniature bug to Smith's clothes. When Kate saw the people, she was so happy that she hurriedly threw the rest of the fruit out of the pail and went to the exit of the enclosure. She didn't notice how the lemurs began to fuss even more. One of them, offended by the fact that he was no longer given fruit, jumped up on her shoulder. They had never done that before, and so Kate was very frightened. "Ouch! Get off me!" She started spinning around, trying to shake the lemur off, but he was scared too and clung to her even tighter and screamed. His fellows thought that something wrong was going on and rushed away, including under the man's feet. So Kate accidentally stepped on someone's tail, and naturally the commotion increased even more. One of the lemurs tried to bite her leg to stop her from hurting his fellow lemurs. "What's going on here?" Roger Smith frowned, having seen and heard what was going on in the enclosure. Meanwhile, Kate had made her way to the exit and was now trying to open the door with cries of despair and fear. "Watch out! Don't let them out!" Kelly shouted and rushed to the enclosure, but Kate was faster. She literally fell out of it, still with the lemur on her shoulders, and the lemur, apparently completely stunned, suddenly rushed from her to the nearest man, who turned out to be a gentleman, millionaire and secret bandit. That is Roger Smith. Panic, screaming, fuss. But in 5 minutes, thanks to the efforts of Kelly and other staff members, lemurs that had jumped out of the enclosure were caught and returned to their place. "It's outrageous," exclaimed Roger, whose expensive suit was soiled and torn as a result of all this fuss. "I'm sorry, but I think I have to go. Do you have any regard for safety?" Your animals will eat someone one day." "Oh, Mr. Smith, I assure you this is the first of its kind in our center," Kelly babbled. "I assure you we have here." "That's enough, my dear," said Smith. "I've done enough for your menagerie. Now, you," Roger pointed his finger at the journalist. "Don't you dare write a word about this, do you understand? I'll rip your head off if you make a laughingstock of your paper, do you understand?" The press representative nodded hastily. Kate saw the man, whose suit was covered with dirt, leaves and stuck pieces of fruit, walking away, and then, unable to stand it, she laughed. "I'm sorry." "Oh, I can't. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." But no one scolded her. Kelly explained with a sigh that it's okay. It happens to newcomers, and gave her own example when she was a trainee here. She forgot to lock the honeybee enclosure, and he roamed all over the center. Even got into the guardhouse where he broke the TV and ruined the food lockers by smearing himself in peanut butter. And cleaning up a honey eater, I'll be honest with you, is no easy task. Kelly summarized her story. Then she invited everyone to join her for lunch. After a while, Lillian joined them, and she and Archie exchanged glances. He shook his head silently, telling her something. Then Lillian gave Kate a suspicious look, and she almost choked on her sandwich. "Well, did you manage to do what you wanted to do?" Kate asked in a whisper as the little band of adventurers made their way home in the late afternoon. Almost Archie shook his head. "I was half a step closer, but unfortunately, you and your lemurs. Anyway, the bug was destroyed." Oh, Kate was startled. "Hey, stop scaring her." Lillian slapped her ex-boyfriend in the face. "It's okay. Plan A was a little flawed to begin with. So we just go to Plan B." "What's Plan B?" Kate asked. "To go to Smith's house and find out for ourselves," Lillian smiled. Kate was truly grateful that there were some breaks in the madness around her to return to some semblance of normalcy. For the next few days, which remained until the reception at Smith's mansion, she could attend to her own business, namely the immediate duties of the man who ran the Jamaica branch of the Phoenix travel agency. "Kate," Peggy said when Kate appeared in the office. "And let me ask you, is this your boyfriend?" Kate rolled her eyes. It was a question that should have been anticipated. After she'd arrived at the office in Archie's car, and he'd walked her all the way to the door and announced too loudly that he had business nearby, so, "I'll see you soon, baby." And he blew her a kiss. "It's complicated," Kate replied. Even so, Peggy rounded her eyes, and it became clear in her brain neural connections are already forming a dozen of the most incredible versions, and soon all of them will be brought to the discussion of the team. "And let's focus on work, okay?" Kate smiled delicately. Immersion in work tasks helped for a while, as if to return to the old life. But still Kate felt as if a chain was tied to her leg, the other end of which went to that part of her life, which had been discovered recently and from which, now she realized it for sure, it was impossible to get rid of or escape. "Would you stop making such a big deal out of it in public?" Kate turned irritably to Archie as he picked her up from the office a few hours later. "Is the Snow Queen afraid of showing emotion?" "First of all, I don't approve of that nickname. I'm not like that at all. And secondly, you and me, this is ridiculous, isn't it? Am I too good for you?" Archie squinted. Kate gasped in indignation. "No, I've never met a more insolent man in my life." "I'm the only one," Archie smiled. "No wonder Lillian left you." She blurted out, and then, seeing the darkening of his eyes, regretted what she'd said, for it was too cruel for anyone to be hurt in such a personal way. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "It's all right," Archie said, as if with his usual cheerful nonchalance, but Kate knew he was hurt. "This? Are you serious?" Kate looked at Lillian, who had returned with her little black dress from the dry cleaners. "Isn't there anything else? What's wrong with it?" Lillian frowned. "It looks very nice." "Exactly. Decent." "It's not decent." Kate smiled. "I'm sorry, but it doesn't suit you at all." "I don't see the point in dressing up," Lillian shrugged. It's not like I'm going to a fashion show. All I have to do is show up at the reception, sneak into his office and download all the information from his laptop. All the more reason. Who knows what kind of situation will arise? Attractiveness is the main weapon of any woman. It's easy for you to say, Lillian sighed thoughtfully. Everything must have been easy for you, with such a face and such a figure. Kate could not think of what to say. She had never thought about how much of her success in life she owed to her looks. But if it were necessary to analyze the subject in depth, she could say that without intelligence, for the sake of beautiful eyes alone, she would certainly not have achieved anything. And yet, she had no intention of backing down. What if I ask? What? Lillian asked from the depths of her closet. I'll ask you to go in a different way, because I'd like to see my sister beautiful. Most beautiful on such a dangerous evening. Lillian slowly moved out of the closet and stared at Kate piercingly, as well as suspiciously. That sounds terribly touching. And you called me sister. If you're uncomfortable with that. No, why? It's just unusual. She tapped her index finger on her chin thoughtfully. All right, if you insist. I think we still have time to do this typically feminine nonsense. But I'm not really into this whole shopping thing. I always thought jeans and a t-shirt were the way to go. So you're going to have to literally hold my hand. I agree, Kate smiled. What's the budget for the dress and the look? Unlimited, Lillian replied, and Kate nodded with satisfaction. During her time in Jamaica, Kate had gotten used to the idea of being able to buy what she needed and what was best. No, she had never been one of those women who loved shopping more than anything else, but she could if the need arose. I feel like a fool, Lillian's nervous voice once again came from the fitting room. One more and we'll go, I promise. Kate encouraged her. Over the past couple of hours, she had almost forced Lillian to try on several cocktail dresses, and it wasn't the same. Finally, the curtain pulled back and Lillian stepped forward. What do you think? She asked, spreading her arms and turning around herself. Kate's jaw just didn't drop because it was that dress, 10 out of 10. Pure silk of a thick scarlet color flowed in an intricate drape from chest to hips, leaving her shoulders bare, and below it flared into a long skirt created from pieces of fabric, just as a flower bud was created by nature from individual petals. It's Kate hesitated, struggling for words. Just awful? Lillian sighed. No, you look beautiful in it, Kate exclaimed. It's a gorgeous choice, nodded the boutique assistant standing next to her. You'll be the center of attention in this outfit. I don't want that. Lillian squinted at her. But it was also obvious that she liked the dress very much. She went to the mirror and looked at herself with a scrutinizing eye. But it's not bad at all. I just need to match it with shoes and a purse, Kate realized. What? Lillian waved her hands in protest. No, I can't take another one of these fashion trials. But Kate, with the support of the boutique consultant, was unstoppable. How long are they going to be there? Nicky said, glancing at his watch. We're just going to be late. And why? I wondered. Can't women get ready faster? What's so hard about it? Pull yourself together, lad. Archie grinned. Girls are girls. By the way, what do you think of Kate? Well, she's a good leader. Only she's very strict, said Nicky. I'm taking some time off at my own expense and I realized I don't want to go to work. No, not because of her. It's just I think it's time for me to take a break from all this tourist business and try my hand at something else. Maybe I should really think about opening a fish restaurant, like Lillian says. Why are you asking about Kate, by the way? You like her? I didn't say that, Archie squinted. I just wanted to hear another person's opinion. I think she's strong, but that's her weakness. I think she's too used to relying on herself, and she's afraid to admit that it hurts her. She's kind of a nobody to me, Nicky said, in the sense that she's not a relative. Well, I mean, I've always thought of her as a stranger, but somehow I don't want anyone to hurt her. "Are you referring to me?" Archie asked. "Sorry, but your reputation speaks for itself." Nicky waved his hands. "I behave like an exemplary knight and I'm not chasing her," answered his friend. "In addition, she seems to hate me. It seems that she wants to scratch my eyes as soon as we are in the same room." Nicky was about to say that this just might be the first sign of a burgeoning love affair, but then, "Sorry we're late," came Kate's voice, and the next moment she and Lillian were upstairs on the second floor, at the beginning of the stairs. Both Nicky and Archie caught their breath, because both young women were beautiful. Their dresses, scarlet silk and black velvet, long and short, were opposite and yet elegantly, luxuriously complemented each other. Lillian and Kate looked so beautiful that one wanted to stop time to admire them for a long time. And of course, all important thoughts about the forthcoming business immediately flew out of the men's minds. "Darling, I have no words," Nicky exhaled, giving his hand to his wife when she came downstairs. "Well, you didn't surprise me with that," Lillian replied with her usual sarcastic sarcasm, but her cheeks, under the skillfully applied evening makeup with an accent on the eyes, flushed with a blush of pleasant embarrassment. "I'm happy to accompany such a charming lady." Archie went beyond compliments to place a kiss on Kate's hand, and she didn't even find something to say. Certainly it was not worth the time and effort for both women to create stunning images for themselves, but both of them gave in to a momentary impulse to take care of their beauty and charm for this evening. And both of them thought later that perhaps such an impulse was dictated by the fact that this evening promised to be not only extremely important, but also extremely dangerous. Roger Smith's mansion was a renovated, repaired, and modernized building dating back to the 18th century, when Jamaica was at its peak, the height of slavery, and where today there are lush gardens around the mansion, including an English rose garden and a Japanese stone garden. There were once the owner's vegetable gardens, and even the beginning of the fields where slaves bent their backs for long, hot days. However, Roger himself did not care much about the historical past of his possessions. He was more interested in making his financial empire, created for many decades, prosper, in keeping his competitors far behind him, in making his business partners agree to the most favorable conditions for him. And so, to once again demonstrate his status to the local high society, as well as to impress some business partners with his hospitality, Roger organized a reception that evening. He invested in it not tens of thousands of dollars and strictly told his assistants and servants that they had no right to make the slightest mistake. But this reception was not an ordinary event where he could show the audience how rich and successful he was. No, this evening Roger expected to solve another extremely important issue that had been bothering him lately, to such an extent that he had lost his normal sleep and appetite, and had also begun to take it out on another of his mistresses, a young French model. And Roger realized that he couldn't take it anymore. "So, I missed something. When did we discuss the plan?" Kate asked. They had arrived at the mansion about 10 minutes ago and now stood in a corner of the luxurious room full of guests. "Didn't you tell her?" Lillian frowned at Archie. "Actually, I thought you would." He pointed at Nicky in a flash. "Once again, I'm the last one," he sighed. "And again, I'm the one who decides and does everything." Lillian gritted her teeth and took Kate by the elbow, pulling her to the balcony, where she had a beautiful view of the garden. Then, explaining that she had left the balcony so that no one would disturb her, she began to give her the gist and meaning of what was happening and what was still to come. It turned out that on the official level, that is, as if for the whole society, Roger Smith continued to be a good, old friend of Lillian's father and Kate. And so, Lillian was invited to this reception with her husband. But in fact, he should have been accurately included in the category of Santiago's chief enemies. The fact was that many years ago, Roger and Santiago had competed to own the same lucrative company. Both businessmen passionately wanted to own it and eventually found a compromise: joint management, common investments. But then it turned out that Santiago embezzled some of the money, which put the company on the verge of bankruptcy. Then Roger, taking advantage of the fact that he owned a controlling stake, pulled the management of the firm on himself and not only brought it out of the crisis, but also provided it with access to the international market, helped it to become a leader in its narrow industry. Santiago, of course, also wanted to make the most of the fruits that brought thus renovated business. But now Roger was not inferior to him. He believed that he could not share the success, if in fact achieved it alone. Santiago then, and could hardly take care of himself, all the time disappeared in rehabilitation centers, where he tried to cure his bad habits, the main of which was a passion for gambling. Santiago was offended that his friend and business partner, as he believed, had betrayed him. And then his legal team came up with a way out. They managed to prove that Roger had acquired some of the shares illegally, and thus his influence on the company was soon minimized. Santiago wanted his friend. To be more precise, he wanted his enemy to stay in the company, but now as a subordinate who would not get in the way. Naturally, Roger wasn't happy with that. He preferred to just sell to his friend. To be more precise, to his former friend, the remaining shares belonging to him, and decided to leave the company altogether. No, they continued to communicate, but now their friendship for the whole society was artificial, while they simply hated each other. It was then that the first and really serious crack ran through the relationship between these two men. And it soon, as they call it, deepened and widened, because now a woman also came between them. It was Lillian's mother. As fate would have it, she had struck both Santiago and Roger with love at first sight. It was clear from the beginning it would be a rivalry, fierce, even cruel, and without any rules. And in the end, Roger lost again. And again he pretended that with his main rival they remained as if they were friends. You see, Lillian finished. Roger has plenty of reasons to want to get rid of you. But not you, said Kate thoughtfully. You're the daughter of his beloved. That makes sense, Lillian sighed. And yet, I can't imagine who else would be so interested in this. So, we just have to figure it out, and that's all it takes. Well, there's Roger. He's walking around greeting guests like a host. It's a good time. Nikki, go and keep an eye on Roger, and if he goes into the study, let me know. Got it, Nikki said and left. Stay here, Archie said to Kate, and they together with Lillian also left, leaving her confused and alone. Kate returned to the hall, but only for a moment to take a glass of juice, and again ran away to the balcony. She was a little offended. No, she didn't expect to be entrusted with something important in this mission, but it seemed to her that she was kept around to keep an eye on her, and that was the end of her role. Do you miss me? A voice came from behind her, and she almost jumped. It was Roger Smith. Good evening, Kate murmured uncertainly, and realized with horror that he was looking at her. I don't think we've met. I would have remembered such a charming person. How did you get the invitation again? Who did you come with? Well, actually, there's a story here. Smiling stupidly, Kate was frantically thinking how to get away from the conversation and from this guy in general. Roger's hand was already on her lower back. Kate swallowed hard. Where was Nikki, who was supposed to look after the owner of the house? Everyone had abandoned her. Suddenly, Roger squinted. Now he was looking at her suspiciously. Are you that zoo girl? Not a zoo, Kate muttered. The Wild Animal Rehabilitation Center. So you were the one in the lemur cage? Roger let go of her so abruptly that she almost fell. And who did you come with? Lillian. Kate blurted out. We're friends, she went on, and immediately regretted it. What interesting friends she had. Yes, Lillian was invited. Well, have a nice evening. With a chuckle, Roger made his way into the house. Kate sighed with relief. Her hands and feet were shaking, and she wondered where Nikki had gone. Will you be back soon? Lillian hissed. If you keep standing behind me, it'll be another 100 years at least, Archie said. His fingers were flying over the computer. He was trying to find the password to crack the digital vault. I'm sorry. I was worried sick. Damn it. This dress is so tight. Lillian nervously adjusted her outfit and cursed under her breath as the strapless bodice almost slipped down. She wanted to say something else, to hurry Archie up again, but the door to the study opened. What are you doing? Roger growled, approaching the couple menacingly. No, you don't have to explain. Don't move. A gun appeared in Archie's hand, and it was pointed at the master of the house. Archie. Lillian exclaimed, "We. This wasn't the deal. You. Put the gun down immediately. I've cracked the password." "Download it," Archie said. "I'm curious to know what you're looking for," said Roger. He ignored the threats and went to a table in the corner of the room and poured himself a glass of water from a crystal carafe. "The weather's sweltering, isn't it?" he said. "We're looking for anything that proves you want to kill Lillian and Kate." Archie threw him angrily. "Is that so? Why would I do that, may I ask?" Roger raised his eyebrows in seemingly unconcealed surprise. "You've always hated my father." Lillian hated to lose control of her emotions, but right now it was happening to her. "I must admit that Santiago was not an easy man to deal with." Roger grinned bitterly. "But not to that extent. Why would I want his daughter?" "Daughters," Archie corrected. "Kate." "Wow, that old fox was fast." "No, I didn't realize he had any more children. Though with his fondness for every skirt, I might have guessed." "You know," said Roger. "You can download anything you find, of course. And there'll even be some interesting stuff on me, but none of what you're talking about. Because I'm not interested in Lillian, or in this suddenly found daughter of the late Santiago. So, do you mind if I sit for a while? Age, you know, requires careful attention." Lillian's hand froze over the computer. She still hadn't started downloading anything. She suddenly hesitated. "Lillian, do you believe him?" Archie asked. "Are you really falling for this?" "You know, I can sense when I'm being lied to," Lillian said, exhaling slowly. "He's telling the truth. He has nothing to do with this. We've made a mistake somewhere. We've missed something." "Have you seen Kate?" A new face burst into the room. "Nicky. I followed him through the garden." He jabbed his finger in Roger's direction. "And then, well, I lost sight of him." "I told you he had a lot to do with it," Archie exclaimed, pointing his gun at the landlord again. "You've had it pretty bad," said Roger nonchalantly. "Would you like some water? And by the way, have you all really run out of enemies and there's only one suspect left? Me alone? I'm really curious." "Lillian, tell me, why couldn't we just take off, go somewhere else and start living again?" Nicky moaned. "I'm so sick of this, and I cannot find Kate. By the way," Nicky rounded his eyes. "And who is Sandro?" "This is his handler?" He pointed his finger again and again in the direction of Roger. There was silence in the room for a few minutes. "How do you know that name?" Lillian asked very tensely. "Well, when we came here, Kate told me that the guy in the street. He said that some Sandro sends his regards to her and promises that she will burn in hell. Kate said that at first she forgot it out of fright, but now she remembered it." "So who is it?" "I know." Roger got up from his chair. "And believe me, this is a really dangerous man. But I have nothing to do with him." "Why should we believe you?" Lillian grinned, but at the same time put her hand on Archie's shoulder. "You don't have to. It's unnecessary." And he reluctantly but obeyed and put his weapon away. "And I also know very well who Sandro is, and what he is capable of. I don't know what's stopping me right now from calling security or the police, from complaining that I'm being threatened or robbed." Roger sighed, pulling on his suit. "Perhaps I still feel somewhat like a friend of your father's, Lillian, even in spite of all he's done. You're right. There's not much reason to believe me. Unless you can make sense of the fact that Sandro tried to destroy my appliance warehouse 2 months ago. The information on that, by the way, is stored on a computer. The password to it, what I assume you already know?" Kate was beginning to think that maybe her friends had already evaporated and she was left here all alone, and it was unclear what would happen to her next. And so, when they suddenly found her in one of the halls of the mansion, she experienced mixed feelings, relief, and a flash of resentment at the same time. But she had even more surprise, because Roger was with them, and it seemed that he was. Well, no longer the enemy, and after a few minutes, Kate could be sure of it all. Because she, having been taken aside, was finally enlightened about everything that had happened. It turned out that Sandro was a small but aggressive, very ambitious businessman connected with the local mafia. He was also a tourist and jealously guarded his market, which Phoenix Travel Agency had broken into a couple months ago. Kate remembered how a strange guy came to the office and said that his boss told him to tell him that Sandro was controlling the tourists in such and such a neighborhood, so there was no reason to organize their excursions there, no reason to put them in a hotel there. Kate didn't speak to this guy personally. She wasn't in the office at that time, and the content of the conversation was transmitted by the excited Peggy. Kate thought it was such nonsense, unworthy of her attention, some local fools who imagined themselves to be no one. Anyway, of course, she didn't stop doing what she was doing and didn't even report it to the police. And so, as it turned out, Sandro decided to act. He sent a man who really had to get rid of Kate for good and forever. What's going to happen to me now? Kate almost cried. The fact that the enemy was definitely known, and that it wasn't Roger or anyone else terribly powerful, didn't make her feel any better. "I took care of it," Roger said, grinning and nodding at Archie. "That smartass just told the police you were attacked. Ha! And that's all he can do. But girl, I've got a lot of connections in Jamaica, luckily. So this man's already been found. And it's thanks to him that I think I'll be able to nail Sandro now. He's been bothering me for a long time." "What's this all about?" Kate was still a little slow on the uptake. "Well, you should definitely stay in a safe place for a couple of days," said Lillian. "And then, why didn't you tell me about Sandro before? We wouldn't have had to start all this." She waved her hands. "And I would have missed the opportunity to see you in a proper dress," Archie grinned, which earned Lillian a new educational slap. I just forgot. It slipped my mind," Kate sniffled. Despite Roger's assurances that there was no danger to anyone in his house, Lillian said they'd better go back to her place. It would just be better that way. She also told Kate that it looked like she'd just have to rest for a few days while her safety was being addressed. And then she'd have to do the hard work, because the police would probably want to take her statement. Kate could only agree. It must have been the fatigue from all that had happened, but those few days flew by like a blur for her. Finally, all the formalities were settled, and everyone who could assure Kate that she was finally safe. "I want to go back to my place," she said confidently. "It's scary to imagine what the agency will be like without me. I wouldn't be surprised if they fired me now." "You could quit," Lillian shrugged her shoulders. "Don't forget, you're an heiress like me. It is only necessary to conduct a genetic examination to confirm your kinship with Santiago, and then—" "I already told you," Kate replied sharply. "I don't want that money." "Perhaps," Lillian said thoughtfully, "but it would be fair. Have you heard of moral compensation? Are you sure you don't need it? Think. You could find something you like." Kate promised to think about it. There was certainly a grain of truth in what her newfound sister was saying. Kate thought about how she could use the money to help her foster parents. For one thing, they had wanted a new cottage for so long, and it would be time to make repairs in the apartment. And she could buy herself a separate apartment, and also perhaps would try to start some business of her own. And of course could donate a substantial amount of money to charity. Probably, Kate thought, her first mom would approve of that. And in the end, Kate told Lillian that she was all for it. And Kate was also amazed to suddenly realize that she had lost all feelings for Nikki. And now she couldn't understand herself at all. How had she gotten so obsessed? But the main thing was that it was in the past. Now her heart was free again. Nikki, by the way, finally decided to quit the travel agency. He and Lillian were going to open a restaurant on the beach. "Kate, are you leaving early again today?" Peggy asked when Kate came out of her office. "Yes. And don't wait for tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow is my legal day off." Peggy shook her head and squinted her eyes. She'd been able to get away with it before. However, the reason for this change was clear. And right now this reason, in the guise of a terribly charming brown-haired man, was entering the office, attracting the eyes of the entire female staff. "I'm sorry, don't be," Kate grumbled embarrassedly, taking the bouquet of pink roses from Archie's hands. "I'm sorry, I couldn't resist teasing you a little." He smiled and put his arm around her waist and led her out of the office. They had a romantic dinner planned for tonight, and tomorrow a trip on a yacht where they could watch dolphins. Kate finally allowed herself what she had so long and cruelly forbidden, a real, ardent romance. Archie had had a serious talk with Lillian the night before, assuring her that he wasn't going to hurt her sister. This morning he had visited one of the best jewelry salons on the island, where he had bought a small but extraordinary gift for Kate, which he was going to present to her tonight, a diamond ring.